People of the realm. Swords in the world of ice and fire are both a weapon and a symbol. Some claim them through inheritance and others by fray level thievery. Valyrian steel is prized above all others, but today's video is about a weapon of a different kind. Are swords that are made of iron utterly useless, or do they serve an altogether different purpose? Today's theory is about the rusty iron swords of the Kings of Winter. Westerosi and Essosi, I'd like you to forget that Jon Snow slew another with Longclaw. Forget that Samwell bloody Tarly ran off with Heartsbane. The Lannisters melt ice down. There are many a sword with a dull blade and a rusty complexion that are arguably more deadly. But why would a weapon of such be needed? A rusty blade is generally scoffed at and can be more likely found in the hands of a poor hedge knight than that of a king. But up here in the north, that's exactly what you'll find. For beneath the great castle of Winterfell, there lies secrets, hidden amongst the crypts. You'll find the entrance to these crypts near the oldest part of Winterfell, known as the First Keep, secured behind an ironwood door. There you will descend down the stone spiral steps into the final resting place of many a Stark. Although the Starks have entombed all array of family members here, only the kings of the north and the lords of Winterfell are depicted with statues of their likenesses. But there are a few exceptions to this rule, which I'll touch upon later. Winterfell is the largest capital in the north, but its subterranean vaults are larger even still. No one knows their true size, as part of the crypts have collapsed with age, hiding who knows what. But someone, at some time, had the foresight to build them and build them deep. Bran the Builder, with a little help from his friends the Children of the Forest and maybe a giant or two, are likely candidates. So we know that the Starks buried their leaders in the crypts under the castle. This has been done since before the War of Conquest, as when Bran visits, he sees the tomb of Jon Stark. He was once king in the north at the time, and is actually responsible for building the Wolf's Den. Now if you're not sure what the Wolf's Den is, it was actually the future home to a separate branch of the Stark line known as the Grey Starks. They're now extinct after they raised up in rebellion with the Boltons, so currently it's acting as a prison for Lord Manderley of White Harbour, so it still exists, just to give you some context there. Now, going back to the tombs, or the crypts as you'll call them, there are at least hundreds, possibly thousands of Starks in these crypts, and they're gathered together and honoured with these statues that I've mentioned. Now this is nothing out of the ordinary, as statues act as tombstones for the dead, and the crypt is just a graveyard after all, isn't it? Now, it would be foolish to think that no other house in all of Westeros has such a grand graveyard, but if you look closely, near Winterfell lies the Barrowlands, and they gain their name because of the barrows that dot across the landscape. Now these are actually ancient graves of the first men, and it's actually said that the tomb of the first king of the first men is here. So large graveyards are all over Westeros. But what makes the crypts at Winterfell different? Starks of all ages, as well as putting these statues of the likeness of the deceased, have also added a stone direwolf to the feet of all of these statues. Now we know the direwolf is a sigil of House Stark and has been for the beginning of time, who knows, but we also know through our time with Ghost, Summer, Shaggy Dog, Grey Wind, Lady and Nymeria that direwolves are extremely protective of Starks, or that they attempt to be if an idiot Stark doesn't get in the way. Let's not forget that some of them have failed, I mean, Grey Winds couldn't prevent Robb's death any more than Nymeria could have prevented the lady's death, and Ghost has gone on a wander on occasion. So the intent is definitely there, and obviously the Starks would think that having a stone direwolf will protect the body of a Stark, and it's kind of the rightful place at the feet of the statue of said fallen Stark. But what about the soul or the spirit? Well, that's altogether different, and another solution was actually found. An iron sword is placed on the tomb of all Starks. Now this is to prevent vengeful spirits from leaving the crypt, and many cultures today follow similar practices to appease the spirits and to ensure that they actually leave this mortal plane. So the question I'm posing is, why would the Starks wish to trap the spirits of their own dead, binding them to iron and keeping them in a dark, dungeon-like tomb beneath Winterfell? Well, let's not forget that when we talk about Starks, we must remember that we are talking about Northmen. We are talking about the descendants of the first men. Now these men had links to all manner of things and worshipped the old gods. And just as the Umbers have links with giants, the Starks have links with wargs. So is it actually possible that an ancient Stark spirit could escape? And if it was, how would an iron sword prevent this? Now iron, or cold iron as it's known in folklore, is actually believed to contain or repel spirits of the dead. I mean, it's actually still used today. You can just visit your local cemetery or graveyards, and there you'll probably see an iron fence surrounding the perimeter, or at least some symbolic version of one. Iron horseshoes are being placed on doors, and that's happened in the past for a very long time as kind of a ward against evil entering your home. Another option of that would be burying an iron knife at the entrance of your home to prevent witches from entering. So throughout history we do have many examples of iron and its uses when it comes to evil spirits. But why would Starks choose iron swords rather than bronze? Because after all, the first men did carry weapons of bronze. Well, let's remember something. The first men sacrificed to the weirwoods. And so there's certainly some blood magic going on there, and it just so happens that when iron rusts, it turns so dark orange that it's almost red. So there is symbolism of the blood magic there. In the vast halls of the crypts, many a Stark has found itself binded to that place by the iron swords that are on top of the tomb. But what if a sword was to rust or removed? Does that mean that that spirit is then loose? Well, let's have a look at the possibilities. So remember before when I said there was an exception to the rule that not only the Kings of Winter and the Lords of Winterfell had statues, but there were other family members who also did. Well, the exceptions are as follows. We had Lyanna Stark, Ned's dear sister, Brandon Stark, his brother, and we also had a son to Baron Stark known as Artus the Implacable. He was actually Eddard's great-grandfather's brother, so for whatever reason, most likely love, Eddard and Baron Stark broke from tradition and chose to honour their siblings, or son in Baron's case, and they have statues as well. Now, you might find it odd that I'm mentioning these particular people, but as we know from the books, Bran and the gang hid in Ned's empty tomb during the sack of Winterfell, and that was in the Clash of Kings. They left after it had been burned to the ground, or after half of the first keep was demolished by God knows what. But they didn't actually leave empty-handed. They left with not one, but 4 swords. Now Osha took the swords that Mikken made for Eddard's tomb. Meera, she took Eddard's father's swords, so Rickard Stark's swords, left with Meera. Brandon took his uncle and his namesake Brandon's with him, and later on we actually find out that Hodor took a much older rusted iron sword and people weren't really aware that he'd taken it. So did I just say that Eddard and Rickard and Brandon's sword was taken? Then surely wouldn't those swords be steel rather than iron, and wouldn't that just ruin this theory altogether? Well, that being said, Steel is actually an alloy of iron and other elements, unlike the much older one that Hodor has been taken, so there are elements of iron within a steel sword. Not as much as that, but just so the theory doesn't fall apart, you see. Either that or people make specifically iron swords just to go with tradition and just add that into the tombs when people die. Now we have 4 vengeful spirits who are free to leave the crypts. Or do we? So let's not forget that Ned's crypt was empty, so there's going to be no evil Ned coming back from the grave. Rickard, well, he would definitely be vengeful after he was burnt alive in his armour by the Mad King in a one-sided trial by combat. Brandon Stark, he would easily be as vengeful as his father, because he saw him being burnt alive whilst he choked himself attempting to reach a sword that had been placed just out of reach in order to try and save his father from his fate. And then finally we have an unnamed owner of the older rusted sword. This could be anyone, but then again it could also be someone their name is not revealed. So to summarise, the Crypts of Winterfell date back way to the times of Bran the Builder and the end of the Long Night. The structure itself is larger than the modern day castle that stands upon it. Stark used the swords of iron and iron alloy to prevent vengeful spirits from escaping. 3 of these swords were taken from the bodies or from the remains of their owners, and that begs a question: did any one of these 3 have a warging ability? And if so, can he use it now he is no longer Ironbound? So there'll be more on that in part 2. So the fire of theory grows cold for now. I want to know, what do you think about this theory? Do you agree that iron binds? Whose swords did Hodor actually take? Was it a certain Lord Commander? And if someone did have a warging ability, what would they warg into? Could it be a certain thing that Summer saw? So gather your furs, down your favourite swill, for I am the Northlander, and remember, you know nothing, and neither do I.